All right, welcome to our second real programming lesson in the Code Train Bootcamp. This is the lesson that I really find really hooks kids and gets them excited about what you can do with this language. And what I'm showing you is sort of the end result. Very often, what I'll do with students is I'll show them kind of where we're headed at the beginning of class, so they know what to expect. But actually, I don't do that with this time. I want them to discover this little activity, this functionality. It kind of look this cool visual as they progress, and I can press any key and it will refresh the screen, and essentially you can see it does some interesting stuff here. So this is quite a long lesson, so what I'm going to do during this lesson at times I'm going to pause and type off screen, and I'll come back and I'll explain. But you can see I've got myself a fresh canvas. Create canvas, no backgrounds is my starting point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to update the colors on this, and I'm going to draw my first couple of shapes, explain to you a little bit what they look like and how they work, and then we're going to, and then we'll jump to the exciting part here in just a second. All right, so the first thing I've added is what's called a rect code, or rectangle, of course, R-E-C-T. And what I've done is I placed it at 50-50, 200 and 125. So the rectangle takes four different dimensions, or numbers inside the brackets. We'll talk about those here in just a second. You'll notice I've also changed the background color and the size of my canvas. That's all I've done so far. So first thing I want to do is talk about this rectangle code. So the 50-50 is the location of the starting point of the rectangle, kind of like in the previous lesson, the two numbers were the text location. And again, it's width and height. So if I have a 605, let's say I wanted to draw this, and I'm not going to actually draw it in the center, I'm going to draw it starting at that center point. So let's say I wanted to go at the center point, so my width is 600, so my x coordinate is 300. Half of that, and my y coordinate would be 250, half of the 500. So just to hit play, I'm deliberately going to not, you'll notice it's not centered. I'm doing that deliberately actually, and you'll see why in just a couple minutes, just by comparison. Now, what you'll also see though is if you look carefully, there's a black line and a white fill. So I'm going to use the three lines of code that are going to alter those three things. And so usually what I'll do is I'll put a space in between the background, and then I'm going to have three lines of code. They're going to affect this rectangle, so I'm going to put them all kind of back to back. You'll see in a second. So I'm going to say fill, and let's maybe just make that 0, 0, 255. We'll give it a blue, a full blue. We'll do a stroke. So those are the ones we remembered from last time. I need something that's going to stand out across against that blue background, so I'm going to say full red. We'll kind of keep our numbers very contrasting. And then what I'm going to do that I didn't do last time is going to add stroke weight, capital W, which will give you the number of pixels you want of thickness of the line. So let's say we'll go up to like a 3. Okay, and I'm going to hit play, and now you'll see that there is a red line. I think you can probably see I'm actually partially colorblind, so it doesn't stand out quite as much, but of course you can make that quite a bit bigger as well if you really want to make that stand out. That will also affect your thing. Okay, so rect is one of the shapes that's affected by these three things. There is also, by the way, a square code if you want to just go with that. That's a little bit newer, so I tend to usually just use rectangle. But just to show you what that would look like, if I go 50, 50, I'll just put this back to the original one, and maybe I'll make it, let's say, 100 pixels wide, so now it only needs one width number. You can see that's up there. You'll also notice that the fill, stroke weight, and stroke weight affected that rectangle as well, because what happens is the draw function is going to keep looping, and it will keep running with those three settings until it sees a new setting. So just to exaggerate that, let's say, for example, that I wanted this to have a different fill color. I would say fill before I draw this square, and I would change that to, maybe I'll just go with I'll make it white, right? 255 is the white. So now I've got that as a different setting, okay? So the stroke and the stroke weight hasn't been updated, so it keeps going with whatever it last saw, and then finally the fill was updated, okay? Now, let's do circle. Or if you want to make an oval, it's ellipse. So you can do circle or you can do ellipse. Again, the circle is new. Ellipse was the older version, and I kind of just tend to work with ellipse right away because the differences are obvious and students can use whichever they like once they know about the existence of others. And I'm going to actually put the exact same coordinates as I did the rectangle, exact same numbers. In fact, I'm going to copy and paste them just to show you what that would look like. And what you will see, actually, what you have your students do is to guess what this is going to look like before they run the code. Okay, so you get them to guess, so I'll get you to do the same thing, and then you hit play, and what you'll see is, oh, ta-da! Well, first of all, did anybody remember that that was white? Yeah, it's going to be white, but everything else is going to be the same. But you'll notice that even though we told it to draw the exact same settings, the result was different. And that's because by default, rectangles and squares draw from the top left corner. And then, of course, you'd ask your students this, what do you notice about the way that the ellipses was drawn? And they'll right away realize it comes from the circle. Now, there's something called rect mode and ellipse mode, where you say rect mode center, and then it will start drawing from the center of the rectangle as well. And then you have to go rect mode corner, I believe, to get it back to the original. Okay. So now I've got that. It almost looks like a little bit of a doggy, so let's imagine we're going to do some lines. So here's how you work with lines. And these are tricky to do, so I'm going to show you some hints here in a couple minutes. So what I want to do is I want to draw a line that represents, the front leg of my little doggy. So I want a line to go from here to down here. Now this is actually quite tricky to figure out. I'm going to show you how to figure it out, hack it out a little bit, but then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a shortcut. So first of all, I have to tell you how a line works. Let's get lines, use strokes. Let's give it a new stroke. Color, let's go 255, 255. That'll make it yellow. And I'm going to draw a line. And I'm just going to draw a line anywhere around here. So the way lines work is it's starting point and end point. So it wants two XY coordinates. So if I want this, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of, okay, my rectangle was drawn at 125 Y. But I made it 250 tall. Sorry, my rectangle was drawn at 250 down, and I made it 125 tall. So I want my line to start at about 375 as far as the Y coordinate goes. So let's say maybe I'll do, I'm just going to go 300, 375. Should put me somewhere near the start of this line. And then just to show you what it does, maybe I'll go 300, 500, and we'll kind of just run those lines and see what that looks like. So, and I do this in front of my students a lot, right? I'll kind of just play around with these numbers and say, hey, does that do what we want? Well, it was okay. I guess my Y coordinate I figured out properly. Probably I'd actually messed up even more to begin with. And again, what I did is I took that starting location of the rectangle, which was 250 down, and then I said I knew my rectangle was 125 tall, so therefore my starting Y coordinate had to be 375. But I want to move this over a little bit, so maybe I'll make this like 350. And then I want it to kind of come like this. So maybe I don't mind 300 as its X coordinate, but this is clearly way too long. So maybe I'll say something like 425, and I'll hit play. You can see I could start to do some legs. And then I can obviously play around and with 4 more and make 4 more legs. But that's a lot of tough code. So let me show you a shortcut. It's going to use some extra functionality. It's going to be really, really helpful when you're doing these kinds of things. And you're going to want to show your students, maybe not this on day 1 or day 2 like I'm doing for you, but you might want to show them very, very quickly how to make this work. And that is to get it to tell you where the mouse is. So that if you click, for example, it'll tell you where your mouse is. So you can kind of say, I want it to go from here and here. Tell me where those mouses are, where those points are, and then we can draw properly. So let me show you how you do that. All right, so what I've done is I've added a new function. So you can see here, you want to make sure you do this very carefully. There's my opening curly brace and there's my closing curly brace for draw. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new function. Again, this is a built-in function into p5.js and processing called MousePressed with a capital P. It's very important you do capital P or it will not work properly. So you're going to type that in. Standard setup. Bracket, bracket, curly brace, curly brace. And inside, what we're going to do is we're going to get it to tell us where the mouse is. So the idea behind MousePress works whenever you click anywhere within this window. The term is calling the function. So whenever I click anywhere in here, it's going to call this function. It's going to run all the lines of code, whether it's 1 line or 10,000 lines of code, within this MousePressed function. Now, what we're going to get to do, you can actually see I've got it, a sample. I did it off screen, just make sure it's working properly. is we're going to get it to say where I clicked. And so this, you'll notice, is labeled a console, and that is used in programming all the time, in web programming. The console is the extra little thing that goes on behind the screens. It's a way for you as a programmer to send yourself messages. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say console.log. So console.log is how you print down here at the bottom. So it prints to you as a programmer, but doesn't print to your user that's going to see your program. And so what do we want to print? We can print as much stuff here as we want. And we're going to print in words. And you can see I'll do it exactly like I did before. Mouse is at, colon, quotation marks. So those are my words. Remember that when we want to do words, words are in quotation marks. We talked about that earlier. But we also want to print some location. So we want to say plus, and then what I want to print is my mouse X variable. So, actually, I don't know if I almost did that too quickly. The mouse X is a built-in variable. It's capital X. That is the location of the mouse. We're going to use that again here in a couple minutes. So we're going to say mouse is at mouse X, plus we want a few more words. So they're not actually words. In between us, we want to say comma space. So print the words mouse is at, colon, plus this built-in variable called mouse X, which is the location of the mouse, plus a comma in between, plus mouse Y, close your bracket, semicolon. So it's very easy to make mistakes there, and so when I'm doing this with students, I often get them to test it partway through, make sure they have the open and closed quotation marks, make sure they got the open and closed quotation marks there. They're going to need plus signs, because every time you want to add something new to your printout, you need to use a plus sign. So we're printing text plus the contents of a built-in variable, plus some text, plus the contents of a built-in variable. We hit play, and now we can click wherever we want our legs. And what you'd be able to do now, if you want, is to draw your other legs for your doggy at those coordinates. I must have, or you can use 375, of course, the Y, and these are going to be approximate, of course. But now that gives me my, maybe I'll just leave it at 425. And now you see I've got my second leg, go find my third leg, go find my fourth leg, and then I can draw those lines. Okay, we're almost done. Now we're going to get to the really, really cool part. Okay, I'm actually going to stop this lesson here because it's getting a little bit long, and we're going to do the funky line I showed you at the beginning on the next video. So now we've done shapes. We've done so the three main shapes we've targeted are rectangle, and I also talked about there being a square. We've done ellipse, and we talked about there's a circle, and now work with a line, and then perhaps even more importantly, the starting to use external functions or extra functions that aren't built into the program called MousePressed. And some of the interesting things you can do with that, and working with mouse X and mouse Y, which are going to become really, really useful in the next video. So we'll stop this one here, and we'll go to the next one where we deal with what I often call the rainbow line. All right, thanks everybody.